Odin's missing eye explained. A pact with an ancient cosmic horror. We are told the story of Odin's missing eye. A noble, inspiring tale of a king so desperate for wisdom that he journeyed to the well of Mimir, at the root of the world tree, and willingly offered his own eye in exchange for a single drink from its waters of knowledge. It is a story of sacrifice for the greater good, a testament to a leader's devotion to his people and his unending quest for foresight. But what if the well was not a source of wisdom, but a prison? And what if the price of a drink was not the loss of an eye, but the gaining of a passenger? Today we journey to the roots of Yggdrasil, but we look not into a well of water, but into an abyss. This is a story not of a sacrifice, but of a pact. A story of a desperate god who, in his search for the knowledge to prevent the end of his world, made a deal with a being that was the end of another. This is the tale of how Odin saw the future, but only by allowing an ancient, cosmic horror to look out at the world through his own empty socket. Welcome to Mythos Unveiled. Today we seek to explain Odin's missing eye, not as the price of wisdom, but as the cost of a terrible, soul-altering bargain. To understand why Odin would make such a terrifying pact, we must first understand the all-consuming fear that defined his reign. Odin was not a king who sat comfortably on his throne. He was a god of immense wisdom, yes, but that wisdom brought him no peace. It brought him only the crushing, absolute certainty of his own doom, and the doom of everything he had built. He was the All-Father, the king of Asgard, the protector of the 9 worlds. But his entire existence was lived under the shadow of a prophecy. Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. It was not a possibility. It was a fixed point in the tapestry of fate. A day would come when his own monstrous offspring, the great wolf Fenrir, would break its chains and devour him whole. A day when the fire giant Surtur would set the cosmos ablaze. A day of absolute, unavoidable annihilation. This knowledge was his eternal torment. Every decision he made, every law he passed, every war he waged, was a desperate move in a cosmic chess game against an opponent fate itself that he knew he could not beat. He was a king playing for a draw, not a victory. His quest for knowledge became an obsession. He sought any scrap of information, any secret, any hidden advantage that might allow him to change the outcome, or at least to understand it more fully. He hung himself from the world tree for 9 days and nights, a sacrifice of himself, to learn the secrets of the runes. The runes gave him power, but they also confirmed the grim prophecy. He sent his 2 ravens, Hugin, Thought, and Munin, Memory, across the 9 worlds each day to bring him news. And every day, the news only painted a darker picture of the approaching end. He learned of the key players in the final battle. He learned the names of the enemies who would rise against him. But he did not know everything. There were gaps in his knowledge, blind spots in his vision. He knew the what, but not always the how or the why. He felt like a man reading the last page of a book, knowing the tragic ending, but missing the crucial chapters that led to it. This uncertainty was unbearable. He needed more. He needed to see the tapestry of fate as it was being woven. He needed to understand the grand design of his own destruction. And he knew there was only one place in all the 9 worlds where such absolute knowledge could be found. He had to go to the well of Mimir. At the base of Yggdrasil, the great world tree that connects all the realms, lay 3 sacred wells. One was the well of Ord, where the Norns wove the destinies of all beings. The third was for Gelmir, the roaring cauldron from which all the rivers of the world flowed. But the second well, situated beneath the root that extended into Jotunheim, the land of the giants, was the most mysterious and the most powerful of all. This was Mimisbrunner, the well of Mimir. The stories say that its waters contained all the wisdom and knowledge of the cosmos. To drink from it was to understand the past, the present, and the future in a single, overwhelming moment of clarity. But the well had a guardian, and its price for a single drink was absolute. The guardian was Mimir himself. His name means the rememberer, or the wise one. He was an ancient being, a Jotun, a giant, but not of the brutish, chaotic sort. He was a being of immense, primordial intelligence. He had existed long before the Aesir gods had risen to power. He was a keeper of secrets so old that the gods themselves had forgotten them. But let us unveil the myth. What if Mimir was not just a guardian? What if he was a warden? And what if the well was not a source of water, but a prison? The Jotunheim Apocrypha, a collection of tales told by the giants and dismissed by the Aesir as heresy, speaks of a different origin for the well. It is not a well, but a crater, the scar left behind by a falling star from a dead and alien cosmos. The water within it is not water, but the diluted, liquid essence of the thing that came with the star. And Mimir does not guard the well. He guards the worlds from the well. In the unfathomable prehistory of the cosmos, long before the war between the Aesir and the Vanir, long before the binding of Fenrir, a being had arrived in the 9 worlds. It was not a god, not a giant, not a demon. It was something else. An entity from a reality with different laws, a different geometry of thought. A being of pure, disembodied, and utterly alien consciousness. Let us call it the knower. This being did not seek to conquer or destroy in a physical sense. It sought only to know, to understand, and to absorb. It was a form of sentient, psychic black hole. It drank the minds and memories of those who came near it, adding their knowledge to its own, but leaving behind only empty, mindless shells. It was a plague of the mind. The ancient powers of that time, perhaps the first giants or even older predeitic forces, managed to defeat it. They could not kill it, for how do you kill a thought? But they could contain it. They bound its liquid, conscious essence at the bottom of a deep crater, a cosmic prison, and they set a powerful, ancient being, Mimir, as its eternal jailer. The wisdom in the well was not a magical property of the water. It was the collective, stolen knowledge of every being the knower had ever consumed, swirling in its dormant, dreaming mind. To drink from the well was not to drink water. It was to allow a small part of the knower's alien consciousness to enter you, to form a pact, a symbiotic and parasitic relationship with the prisoner in the abyss. This was the terrible secret that Mimir guarded. And this was the place that Odin, in his desperate thirst for knowledge, now approached. Odin traveled for an age, crossing the frozen wastes of Jotunheim, until he finally reached the dark, gnarled root of Yggdrasil. There, in a shadowed grove, was the well, its surface still and dark as polished obsidian, reflecting no light. And beside it sat the ancient, hoary figure of Mimir, his eyes holding the weight of forgotten eons. "I have come for a drink from your well, old Mimir," Odin declared, his voice filled with the authority of the king of Asgard. Mimir looked at him, his gaze penetrating, seeing not just the god, but the deep, gnawing fear that drove him. "I know why you have come, All-Father." Mimir's voice was like the grinding of ancient stones. "You seek the knowledge to unwrite your doom, but the price of such knowledge is great. What will you give me for a single draught?" Odin offered him gold, power, magical artifacts. Mimir refused them all. They were meaningless to him. "The well does not ask for treasure, son of Bor," he said. "It asks for a part of the one who drinks. It demands a sacrifice of self. It demands an offering of perception. It demands your eye." This is the famous part of the story. A simple, if gruesome, transaction. An eye for wisdom. But the reality of the pact was far more horrifying. Mimir was not just asking for payment. He was explaining the terms of the psychic infection. The knower, the entity in the well, could not simply give Odin knowledge. It had to create a permanent conduit, a gateway through which it could interface with him. To do so, it needed a vacant space, a void in his physical being that it could inhabit. It needed an empty vessel. It needed his eye socket. The sacrifice of the eye was not a payment. It was the surgical procedure required to install the new, terrible sense that would allow him to perceive the knower's wisdom. He had to give up his physical sight in one eye to gain a terrible new inner sight from another. Odin, in his desperation, did not see the distinction, or perhaps he saw it, and in his arrogance, believed he could control the consequences. He agreed to the price. Without hesitation, he took his own spear, Gungnir, and with a terrible silent act of will, he gouged out his own right eye. He held the bleeding, ruined orb in his hand, a testament to his unyielding resolve, and he offered it to Mimir. Mimir took the eye and dropped it into the dark, still water of the well. As it sank into the depths, it did not dissolve. It became a new, unblinking eye for the entity below, a permanent physical link to the world of Asgard, a window into the mind of the All-Father himself. The pact was sealed. Mimir then took a great drinking horn, the Gyllerhorn, which his brother Heimdall would one day use to signal the start of Ragnarok, and he dipped it into the well. He offered the horn, filled with the dark, shimmering liquid, to Odin. Odin took the horn. He looked into the water. It was not water. It was liquid darkness, swirling with captured starlight and the faint, ghostly images of forgotten minds. He hesitated for only a moment. Then he raised the horn to his lips and drank deeply. The effect was instantaneous and agonizing. It was not like drinking water. It was like drinking the universe. A billion voices screamed in his mind. He saw the birth of stars and the death of galaxies. He saw the thoughts of every being that had ever lived and died. He saw the intricate, endless, and terrifyingly complex tapestry of fate, not as a metaphor, but as a living, breathing, mathematical reality. And he saw Ragnarok. He did not just see a future battle. He saw every single thread that led to it. He saw the precise moment of Loki's betrayal. He saw the exact way Fenrir's jaws would close around him. He saw the face of his own killer. He saw the futility of every plan he had ever made to stop it. He saw, with absolute soul-crushing clarity, that his doom was not just inevitable. It was a necessary structural component of reality itself. The knowledge flooded him, overwhelmed him, and nearly shattered his divine consciousness. He collapsed, screaming, clutching his head, the single remaining eye wide with a horror that no other being had ever known. But something else was happening. The liquid he had drunk was not just information. It was a seed. The essence of the knower was now inside him. It flowed through his veins, up into his brain, and settled in the raw, empty space of his eye socket. He did not just have the knowledge now. He had the source of the knowledge living inside him. When he finally rose, he was a changed god. The youthful arrogance was gone, replaced by an ancient, profound weariness. His one remaining I saw the world of the present. But from his empty socket, he now had a new kind of vision. He could see the patterns, the probabilities, the threads of fate not as clear images, but as a constant, low-level hum of information, a stream of cosmic data fed to him directly by the parasitic consciousness he now hosted. He had gained the wisdom he sought, but the price was not his eye. The price was his peace. The price was his solitude. He was never, ever alone in his own head again. The knower was always with him, a silent, watching passenger, looking out at the 9 worlds through his vacant eye, learning, remembering, and waiting. Odin returned to Asgard a different king. He was more secretive, more driven, more willing to make terrible, morally ambiguous choices. The other gods saw only a new, grim wisdom. They did not see the alien intelligence that was now whispering advice in his mind. His entire reign, from this point forward, can be re-examined through the lens of this terrible pact. His decisions were no longer entirely his own. They were a complex, often contradictory, blend of his own desires and the subtle, patient influence of the knower. Consider his relationship with Loki. Why would Odin, the god of order, make a blood oath with a being of pure chaos? The common explanation is that he valued Loki's cunning. But what if the knower, the entity in his head, recognized Loki as a fellow agent of change, a catalyst, a being necessary to bring about the great final event of Ragnarok? Perhaps the knower whispered to Odin, "Keep this one close. He is useful. He is the key to the end, and the end is a form of knowledge we have not yet consumed." Consider his relentless pursuit of the Einherjar, the army of fallen warriors for Valhalla. The traditional view is that he was building an army to fight at Ragnarok. But the knower, in its infinite wisdom, had shown him that this army could not win. So why build it? Perhaps the knower's influence twisted the purpose. The army was not to win the war, but to make the war more glorious. A greater, more epic, more passionate final battle would release a far greater amount of psychic energy, of story, of data for the knower to observe and absorb through Odin's eye. He was no longer just a king preparing for war. He was an unwilling producer, staging the most spectacular show in cosmic history for an audience of one. And consider his treatment of Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel Loki's monstrous children. He had them bound, cast out, and imprisoned long before they had committed any crime. This is often seen as a pragmatic act to delay the prophecy. But what if it was the knower's influence again? The entity existing outside of linear time knew that these beings had to be in their designated places for the final act to unfold correctly. By imprisoning them, Odin was not delaying fate. He was actively setting the stage, ensuring all the key players were in position for the final curtain. He was a man trying to stop a play, who was being subtly manipulated into becoming its director. Odin became a tragic figure, a king fighting a war on two fronts. On the outside, he fought against the coming doom of Ragnarok. And on the inside, he fought a quiet, desperate, and losing battle against the alien consciousness that was slowly, patiently turning his quest for salvation into a perfectly orchestrated tragedy. The story does not end there. In the war between the Aesir and the Vanir gods, a war that happened after Odin's visit to the well, the gods exchanged hostages to ensure the peace. Mimir, the wise one, was sent to live with the Vanir. However, the Vanir grew to distrust him, believing he was a mouthpiece for Odin's schemes. In a fit of paranoid rage, they beheaded him and sent his head back to Odin. This would seem to be the end of the well's guardian. But Odin, using his powerful magic and the knowledge he had gained, preserved Mimir's head. He embalmed it with special herbs and chanted runes over it, so that it would never decay and could still speak, giving him counsel and sharing secret knowledge. He then returned to the well and placed the living head beside it, to continue its eternal watch. On the surface, this is a story of Odin preserving a source of wisdom. But the unveiled truth is more chilling. Odin was now permanently connected to the knower. But the connection was raw, unfiltered, and maddening. Mimir, for eons, had acted as a translator, a filter, a buffer between the raw, chaotic consciousness of the knower and the structured reality of the nine worlds. He was the only one who could speak to the entity in the well without going insane. By preserving Mimir's head, Odin was not just saving a friend. He was desperately rebuilding a crucial component of his new, terrifying sensory apparatus. He now had a direct line to the cosmic horror in his own head, but he needed Mimir to act as the interpreter, to translate the screams of the void into coherent, usable counsel. His conversations with the head of Mimir were not just a king seeking advice. They were a tormented god, desperately trying to understand and control the alien intelligence that was now a permanent part of his own being. The head of Mimir was his last bastion of sanity, the final firewall protecting his own identity from being completely consumed by the endless, hungry knowledge of the thing in the well. So we must look at Odin's missing eye not as a scar of a noble sacrifice, but as a gateway. A wound that was deliberately opened to allow something ancient and terrible to look through. Odin did gain wisdom. He gained the foresight he so desperately craved. But it was not a gift. It was an infection. He became the host for a cosmic psychic parasite, a being of pure, disembodied knowledge that used him as its sensory organ to experience and ultimately know our reality before its inevitable prophesied consumption. He is the most tragic figure in the Norse pantheon, a king who, in his attempt to save his world from a fiery end, made a pact with a being of a cold, silent, and intellectual end. He gave up his eye to see the future, only to learn that his every action from that moment on would be influenced by a force that was ensuring that future would come to pass in the most spectacular and data-rich way possible. He became the ultimate pawn in the game he was trying to win, the image of the one-eyed god, wandering the worlds, cloaked and hooded, is not just the image of a king in disguise, seeking knowledge. It is the image of a man hiding a terrible secret. It is the image of a host, trying to shield the world from the gaze of the ancient, alien passenger that is forever looking out from his own empty, shadowed socket. He is the All-Father, and he has invited a horror into his own head that is older and more powerful than any father. Sometimes, the thirst for knowledge can lead us to drink from wells that are best left sealed. And sometimes, the price of seeing the future is to become a slave to its most terrible architect. Thank you for joining us on this journey to the roots of the world tree. If this unveiling of a sacred myth has made you see the All-Father in a new, more terrifying light, show your support by liking this video, subscribing to Mythos Unveiled, and hitting the notification bell so you never miss another journey into the darkest secrets of our legends. What other divine sacrifice do you believe holds a more sinister secret? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, be wary of the wisdom that comes from the abyss. The knowledge it offers may not be worth the price of the eye that sees it.